This is just a short comment to begin with from the commentaries. The 10th reigns after the Enlightenment was spent at Parilayaka, while the quarrel at Kosambi was at its height. The same tradition has it that the 11th reigns was spent in the southern hills, the hills south of Rajgaha, and that the following event happened then. And then this is from the suttas. It's in both the Sutta Nipata and the Samyutta Nikaya. Thus I heard. At one time, the Blessed One was living in the Magadhan country at the village of Ekanala. It was then sowing time, and Kasi, the plowman, Bharadvaja, of the Brahman caste, had as many as 500 plows at work. In the early morning, the Blessed One dressed, and taking his bowl and outer robe, he went to where Kasi Bharadvaja's work was in progress. It happened to be the occasion when the Brahman was making a distribution of food. The Blessed One went to where the food was being distributed, and he stood at one side. The Brahman, seeing him waiting for alms food, said, I plow, monk, and I sow, and having plowed and sown, I eat. You too, monk, should likewise plow and sow, and having plowed and sown, you shall eat. I too, Brahman, plow and sow, and having plowed and sown, I eat. We see no yoke or plow or shoe or goad or oxen of Master Gotama's, yet Master Gotama has said, I too, Brahman, plow and sow, and having plowed and sown, I eat. And then he addressed the Blessed One in stanzas. You claim to be a plowman, yet we see no plowing that you do. Give answer, therefore, sir, that we may recognize your plowing. And the Buddha's response. My seed is faith. My rein, control. My plow and yoke are understanding. My pole is conscience. Mind is my tie. And mindfulness, my shoe and goad. Guarded in body as in speech, and modest in the use of food, truth is the reaping that I do. Forbearance, my unharnessing. My harnessed ox is energy, which draws on to surcease a bondage. Going to where no sorrow is, and never turning back again, such is the plowing that I do. It has the deathless for its fruit. Who does this plowing will be freed from every kind of suffering. Then Kasi Bharadvaja had a large bronze bowl filled with milk rice and brought it to the Blessed One. Let Master Gotama eat the milk rice. Master Gotama is a plowman, since he does the plowing that has the deathless for its fruit. And the Buddha's response is in verse. I cannot use rewards for singing songs. Such is the law of seers. Enlightened ones will not accept rewards for singing songs. Such is their habit, while their law prevails. When a seer is free from taints, with conflict stilled, as you would say, has reached the absolute, then give him gifts with other thoughts in mind. He is the field for those who would reap merit. Then whom shall I give this milk rice to, Master Gotama? Brahman, in this world with its deities, its maras, and its divinities, in this generation, with its monks and Brahmins, with its princes and men, I do not see anyone who could rightly digest this milk rice if he ate it, unless he were a perfect one or a disciple of his. Therefore, Brahman, throw the milk rice away where there is no grass, or drop it into water where there is no life. Kasi Bharadvaja, the Brahman, dropped the milk rice into water where there was no life. As soon as it was dropped into the water, it hissed and boiled and fumed and steamed. Just as a plow shoe heated for a day and dropped into water would hiss and boil and fume and steam, so did that milk rice. Then the Brahmin was awestruck and his hair stood on end. He went to the Blessed One and prostrated himself at his feet and said, "Magnificent Master Gotama, I wish to receive the going forth from Master Gotama and the admission." And not long after, the Venerable Bharadvaja became one of the Arahants. Okay, so this is from the commentary again. The novice Rahula, the Buddha's son, was now 18. The Buddha was staying at Jeta's Grove, and he had set out one morning to the city for alms. His son was following close behind, and as he did so, his thoughts wandered, and he began to speculate on what his prospects might have been had his father become a universal monarch, as had been predicted of him if he did not renounce the house life. So then it goes into the sutta, and of course this is a truncated version, and as I say that the in the sutta itself it's not specified what Rahula was thinking, but obviously he was thinking something because the Buddha actually turned to him and gave him a bit of a teaching, and then the Rahula himself felt been caught out. He was a bit sort of embarrassed, and ended up not going on alms round. Anyway, I'll read the part from the sutta. While the Venerable Rahula was following close behind, the Blessed One turned and looked at him, and he addressed him thus: "Rahula, any kind of material form whatever, whether past, future, or present, in oneself or external, coarse or fine, inferior or superior, far or near, should all be regarded as it actually is with right understanding thus: this is not mine, this is not what I am, this is not myself." Only material form, Blessed One? Only material form, Sublime One? Material form, Rahula, and feeling and perception and formations and consciousness. Then the Venerable Rahula thought, who can go on into the town for alms now after being publicly admonished by the Blessed One? And he turned back and sat down under a tree with his legs crossed, his body held erect and mindfulness established before him. The Venerable Sariputta saw him thus, and he told him, "Rahula, maintain mindfulness of breathing in being. If that is maintained in being and well developed, it brings great fruit and many blessings." When it was evening, the Venerable Rahula rose from retreat and went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, he sat down at one side. Then he said, "Lord, how should mindfulness of breathing be maintained in being and well developed in order that it may bring great fruit and many blessings?" And of course, Sariputta was Rahula's preceptor as a novice, and was his mentor through probably through his years, and so they probably had a very close relationship. So then Sariputta giving that advice on meditation or encouragement. Also, I've heard it said that and of course, a similar speculation to the speculation of Rahula being about his prospects had his father been a universal monarch. But also, I've heard it said that Rahula is walking behind the Buddha, and the Buddha at that point is, he would have been like mid-40s. Rahula is 18 and be his sort of mid-40s, kind of the peak of his both physical and mental powers, really, as you just enter in an ordinary way of looking at it, and I've heard it speculate. The Rahula's walking behind the Buddha, and he's kind of admiring the Buddha, and said, "Gosh, and he said, the Buddha's really quite admirable and awesome, and I'm his son. I'm not so bad myself. So that sense of proliferation." So then the commentator, or the author, draws from the commentary as a condensing it a bit. The Buddha then first described to him in detail the four primary elements of material form: earth or hardness, water or cohesion, fire or temperature and ripening, and air or distension and motion, and also space as an element, primary element, and how each should be regarded in the same way as material form. Then he said, and this is back to Majjhima 62, "Try to be like the earth, Rahula, for by so doing, when agreeable or disagreeable contacts arise, they will not invade your heart or stay there. Just as when people drop clean things or filthy things or excrement or urine or spittle or pus or blood on the earth, for that the earth is not ashamed, humiliated, or disgusted. Try to be like water, Rahula. When people wash away these things with water, for that the water is not ashamed, humiliated, or disgusted. Try to be like fire, Rahula. When fire burns these things, for that the fire is not ashamed, humiliated, or disgusted. Try to be like air, Rahula, for by so doing, when agreeable or disagreeable contacts arise, they will not invade your heart or stay there. Just as when air blows away clean things or filthy things or excrement or urine or spittle or pus or blood, for that the air is not ashamed, humiliated, or disgusted. Try to be like space, Rahula, for by so doing, when agreeable and or disagreeable contacts arise, they will not invade your heart and stay there. For space has no standing place of its own. Practice loving kindness to get rid of ill will. Practice compassion to get rid of cruelty. Practice sympathy to get rid of apathy. Practice equanimity to get rid of resentment. Practice contemplation of loathsomeness in the body to get rid of lust. Practice contemplation of impermanence to get rid of the conceit I am. Practice mindfulness of breathing, for when that is maintained in being and well developed, it brings great fruit and many blessings. So then the Buddha then explicates the 16 modes of mindfulness of breathing in terms of a practice. And that in that the Rahula's takes that and he satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's word. So he's been given kind of a full instruction. And then, and there's Rahula's attainment of arahantship is told later. I mean, it's later in this book, so we will get to that one. He's been given he's 18 and got a good handle on the practice, but he's still practicing for realization. And that will come up later in the book. Any questions, comments so far? Yeah.
Is that contemplation of impermanence, is that kind of like contemplating for aging, sickness, and death? Like, how is that contemplation get rid of the conceit I am?
Oh, well, I mean, that one is aging, sickness, death, because that's concerning the body. But then, contemplate the impermanence of feeling, perception, thoughts, consciousness itself. That is the mental factors of because the body forms a basis of I am physically in terms of perception, but then feelings, perception, all the mental factors are also a basis for that perception or that assumption of I am. So that contemplation of the every mental element that one experiences is impermanent, not changing, uncertain, fraught with inconstancy. So that one steps back from that extrapolation from something so unstable into the conceit I am.
I was wondering if you or Ajahn Pasanno actually had any thoughts that, because Ajahn Pasanno, you recently kind of related your experiences with Anapanasati, and then you received instruction on anatomical parts followed by metta, and then returned to Anapanasati with a new perspective or a new foundation. And it's actually very similar. I noted that actually many years ago when I heard that story, it was like, oh, that's like the Rahula Water Sutta. Because we kind of skipped over it there, but in the Buddha's instruction on the elements, it actually includes the anatomical parts as part of his instructions. So it's kind of combined elements and Sula kind of a reflection. And then he moves on to using the elements as a basis for the Brahma Viharas. 16 steps about
Not so much. We'll have that in mind when you gave me those instructions.
No. It just seemed the right thing to do.
I had experience
Okay. Narrator 2 goes in. The next rains, the 12th, found the Buddha at Vairanja. And then this is from the Vinaya. And it's also in the Anguttara. This particular teaching. The occasion was this. The Buddha, the Blessed One, was living at Vairanga, at the root of Naleru's Nimba tree, with a large community of bhikkhus, with 500 bhikkhus, when a Brahmin of Vairanga heard about the Blessed One and decided to go and see him. He went to him and exchanged greetings with him, and when this courteous, formal talk was finished, he sat down at one side. He said, Master Gotama, I have heard that the monk Gotama pays no homage to Brahmins who are old, aged, burdened with years, advanced in life, and come to the last stage, that he does not rise up for them or invite them to sit down. And I find that this is actually so, too, for Master Gotama does not, in fact, do these things. That is not good, Master Gotama. Brahman, in this world with its deities, its maras, and its divinities, in this generation with its monks and Brahmins, with its princes and men, I see none whom I should pay homage to, or rise up for, or invite to sit down. For his head would burst open when a perfect one paid homage to, or rose up for, or invited to sit down. Master Gotama is lacking in taste. There is one way in which it could rightly be said that the monk Gotama is lacking in taste. Taste for visible forms, taste for sounds, odors, flavors, and tangibles. These are rejected in a perfect one, cut off at the roots, made like palm stumps, done away with, and no more subject to future arising. But surely, Brahman, you did not mean that. Master Gotama has no sense of values. There is a way in which it could rightly be said that the monk Gotama has no sense of values. Sense of value of visible forms, sense of value of sounds, odors, flavors, and tangibles. These are rejected in a perfect one. Cut off at the roots, made like palm stumps, done away with, and no more subject to future arising. But surely, Brahman, you did not mean that. Master Gotama teaches that there is no ought to do. And that's a curious idiom that is literally expressed, but it means like teaches a doctrine of no action. There is a way in which it could rightly be said that the monk Gotama teaches that there is no ought to do. For I do teach that no one ought to do wrong bodily or verbal or mental acts, and the many sorts of evil, unwholesome things. But surely, Brahman, you did not mean that. Master Gotama teaches nihilism. There is a way in which it could rightly be said that the monk Gotama teaches nihilism. For I do teach annihilation of lust and hate and delusion, and the many sorts of evil, unwholesome things. But surely, Brahman, you did not mean that. Master Gotama is fastidious, which I assume is sort of like more like sort of overly fussy with some kind of things. Like he has way too many rules. There is a way, and saying it as a pejorative, there is a way in which it could rightly be said that the monk Gotama is fastidious. For I am fastidious about wrong bodily, verbal, and mental acts, and the many sorts of evil, unwholesome things. But surely, Brahman, you did not mean that. The monk Gotama is one to lead away. And probably in the sense of leading away from society, leading away from duties and the things that were considered kind of the foundation of, say, especially of a Brahmin society. There is a way in which it could rightly be said that the monk Gotama is one to lead away. For I teach the Dhamma for the leading away of lust and hate and delusion, and the many sorts of evil, unwholesome things. But surely, Brahman, you did not mean that. The monk Gotama is a mortifier. Probably in the sense of similar, like overly ascetic. There is a way in which it could rightly be said that the monk Gotama is a mortifier. For I say that wrong bodily, verbal, and mental acts, are evil, unwholesome things to be mortified. And him I call a mortifier, in whom evil, unwholesome things to be mortified are rejected, cut off at the roots, made like palm stumps, done away with, and no more subject to future arising. And in the perfect one, these things are rejected, and no more subject to future arising. But surely, Brahman, you did not mean that. The monk Gotama has missed his rebirth. It's probably like in sense of he's obviously taken an unfortunate rebirth. There is a way in which it could rightly be said that the monk Gotama has missed his rebirth. When a person's re-entry into a womb and his future coming to birth are rejected, and no more subject to future arising, then I say of him that he has missed his rebirth. And in the perfect one, re-entry into a womb and future rebirth are rejected. And sort of, made like the palm stump and done away with. No more subject to future arising. But surely, Brahman, you did not mean that. Now suppose a hen had 8 or 10 or 12 eggs which she brooded over, incubated and hatched with care. Should the first of those chickens to pierce the shell with the points of its claws and beak, the first to come out safely, be called the eldest or the youngest? It should be called the eldest, Master Gotama, for it is the eldest of them. So too, Brahman, in this generation given over to ignorance, enclosed in an egg of ignorance, sealed in by ignorance, I alone in the world have discovered the supreme full enlightenment by piercing the shell of ignorance, of nescience. So it is I who am the eldest and the foremost in the world. The Buddha then described how by attaining the 4 meditations and the 3 true knowledges, he had come to know directly that birth was ended for him. The Brahman was convinced and he took the 3 refuges. He then offered lodging and support to the Buddha for the coming rains, which was accepted. And then it goes into an account from the Vinaya. Now, alms food was hard to get in Vairanga then. There was a famine, and food tickets had been issued. It was not easy to survive even by strenuous gleaning. However, some horse dealers from the North Country with 500 horses had taken up residence for the rains at Vairanga at that time. They let it be known that for bhikkhus, there would be a measure of bran each, which could be obtained at the horse pens. One morning, bhikkhus dressed and taking their bowls and outer robes, they wandered for alms in Vairanga. When they got no alms food, they went to the horse pens, and each brought a measure of bran back to the monastery, where they pounded it up in a mortar and ate it. The Venerable Ananda ground up a measure of bran on a stone and then took it to the Blessed One. The Blessed One ate it. He had heard the sound of a mortar. Now perfect ones know and ask, and also they know and do not ask. They ask when they judge it to be opportune, and they refrain from asking when they judge it to be inopportune. Perfect ones ask in order to promote good, not for any other reason. The bridge to the bad is demolished in the case of perfect ones. Enlightened ones, perfect ones, question bhikkhus for 2 reasons: in order to teach the Dhamma, or in order to make a training precept known to disciples. On that occasion, the Blessed One asked the Venerable Ananda, "Ananda, what is that sound of a mortar?" The Venerable Ananda explained, Good, Ananda, you have conquered like good men. But there will be later generations who will look down upon even cooked meals of fine rice with meat. The Venerable Mahamoggallana went to the Blessed One. He said, Lord, alms food is hard to get in Vairanja now. There is a famine and food tickets have been issued. It is not easy to survive even by strenuous gleaning. Lord, this earth's undersurface is rich and as sweet as pure honey. It would be good if I turned the earth over. Then the bhikkhus will be able to eat the humus that water plants live on. But, Moggallana, what would become of the creatures that depend on the earth's surface? Lord, I shall make one hand as broad as the great earth and get the creatures that depend on the earth's surface to go onto it. I shall turn the earth over with the other hand. Enough, Moggallana. Do not suggest turning the earth over. Creatures will be confounded. Lord, it would be good if the Sangha bhikkhus went to the northern continent of Uttarakuru for alms, which is kind of like a mythical land of plenty. Enough, Moggallana. Do not suggest that the Sangha bhikkhus should go to Uttarakuru for alms. While the Venerable Sariputta was alone in retreat, this thought arose in him. Which Buddha's holy life did not last long? Which Buddha's holy life lasted long? When it was evening, he rose from retreat and he went to the Blessed One and he put this question to him. In the time of the Blessed Ones Vipassana, Sikhi, and Wesabu, the holy life did not last long. Sariputta. In the time of the Blessed Ones Kakusanda, Konagamana, and Kassapa, the holy life lasted long. Lord, what was the reason why the holy life did not last long in the time of the Blessed Ones, Vipassana, Sikhi, and Wesabu? Those Blessed Ones were not forward in teaching the Dhamma to the disciples in detail. They pronounced few threads of argument, suttas, songs, expositions, stanzas, exclamations, sayings, birth stories, marvels, and questions. No disciple's training rule was made known. The patimokkha, the monastic code, was not laid down. Just as when various flowers are put on a table without being held together by threads, they easily get scattered, blown away, and lost. Why is that? Because they are not held together with threads. So too, when those Buddhas, those Blessed Ones, and the disciples enlightened by them personally disappeared, then the disciples most recently gone forth, variously named, of various races, various clans, soon let the holy life lapse. Those Blessed Ones habitually read their disciples' minds and advised them accordingly. Once in a certain awe-inspiring jungle thicket, the Blessed One Wesabu, accomplished and fully enlightened, read the minds of the Sangha bhikkhus 1,000 strong, and this was how he advised and instructed them. Think thus, do not think thus. Give attention to thus. Do not give attention thus. Abandon this, enter upon and abide in this. Then, by following his instructions, their hearts were freed from taints through not clinging. And that jungle thicket was one so awe-inspiring that normally it would make a man's hair stand on end if he were not free from lust. That was the reason why those Blessed Ones' holy life did not last long. But Lord, what was the reason why the holy life lasted long in the time of the Blessed Ones, Kakusanda, Konagamana, and Kassapa? Those Blessed Ones were forward in teaching the Dhamma to the disciples in detail, and they pronounced many threads of argument, suttas, songs, expositions, stanzas, exclamations, sayings, birth stories, marvels, and questions. The disciples' training rule was made known. The patimokkha, the monastic code, was laid down, just as when various flowers are put on a table well tied together with threads, they do not get scattered, blown away, and lost. Why is that? Because they are well tied together with threads. So too, when those Buddhas, those Blessed Ones, and the disciples enlightened by them personally disappeared, then the disciples who had gone forth most recently, variously named, of various races, of various clans, maintained the holy life for a long time. That was the reason why those blessed ones' holy life lasted long. Then the Venerable Sariputta rose from his seat and, arranging his robe on one shoulder, he raised his hands, palms together, towards the Blessed One and said, "This is the time, Blessed One. This is the time, Sublime One, for the Blessed One to make known the training rules, to lay down the patimokkha, so that the holy life may last long." Wait, Sariputta, wait. The Perfect One will know the time for that. The Master does not make known the disciples' training rule or lay down the patimokkha till certain taint-producing things manifest themselves here in the Sangha. But as soon as they do, then the teacher will see to both of these, doing so for the purpose of warding off those taint-producing things. Some taint-producing things do not manifest themselves until the Sangha has become great by long establishment and grown large. It is then that they manifest themselves, and then that the teacher makes known the disciples' training rule and lays down the patimokkha for the purpose of warding off those taint-producing things. Some taint-producing things do not manifest themselves till the Sangha has become great by completeness, become great by excessive gain, great in terms of large and big, great by learning. But as yet, the Sangha is free from infection, free from dangers. It is stainless, pure, and consists of heartwood. For of these 500 bhikkhus, the most backward is a stream enterer, no more subject to perdition, certain of rightness, and destined to enlightenment. Then the Blessed One turned to the Venerable Ananda. Ananda, it is a custom of perfect ones not to set out wandering in the country without taking leave of those who invited them for the rains. Let us go and take leave of the Vairanja Brahman. Even so, Lord. The Venerable Ananda replied. Then the Blessed One dressed, and taking his bowl and outer robe, he went to the Venerable Ananda as his attendant monk to the Vairanja Brahman's house, where he sat down on a seat made ready. The Brahman came and paid homage to him. The Blessed One said, "We have spent the rains invited by you, Brahman, and we take our leave. We wish to set out wandering in the country." "It is true, Master Gotama. You were invited by me to spend the rains. What ought to have been given was not given, though that was not because we had not got it, or because we were unwilling to give. But how could we manage it? For the lay life is a busy one with much to be done. Let Master Gotama, together with the Sangha bhikkhus, accept tomorrow's meal from me." The Blessed One consented in silence. Then, after he had instructed the Brahman with talk on the Dhamma, he got up and went away. Next day, when the meal was finished, the Vairanja Brahman clothed the Blessed One with a robe, and he clothed each bhikkhu with 2 pieces of cloth. And when the Blessed One had instructed him with the talk on the Dhamma, he departed. So, any thoughts, questions on these past readings? Just that, I think one thing is just that the Buddha praising the monk's simplicity. I think it's even more explicit in some. If it's not in that Vinaya, then there's somewhere else where it's a little bit more explicit, where the Buddha is praising the the Sangha for being patient and dealing with the difficulties that they're experiencing, and that future generations will benefit by their good example. And then, of course, the Buddha's excuse me, waiting. Well, one is just that the holy life lasting long, when there's the teachings and the training are laid out clearly, and say, yeah, we're fortunate to be at a time when that's the legacy that the Buddha left us, is that having the teachings and the training to practice by, because that's also how the Buddha himself described his teaching or his dispensation was always, say, Dhamma Vinaya. It wasn't just my teaching or this truth. It's this teaching and this training that is laid down. And so that having but not just making up a bunch of rules, but also responding to the circumstances, because just psychologically, we all kind of resist rules and protocols if they don't have have some kind of precedent or some kind of clear logic or reason for why they're there. If it's just some sort of arbitrary kind of rule, but so the Buddha waiting for circumstances in the Sangha to be such that it's appropriate to start laying down these training precepts and guidelines and that also that it's inevitable that when something has been around for some time, when it's gotten excessive gain, a whole lot of learning and whatnot, then it, or just by size, then it has the seeds of its own decline, and there's quite a few discourses where the Buddha, points to the various reasons for, say, decline of the training, and certainly that one of the things that he really cautioned against is the gain, honor, and fame as being a great source of problems for, say, monastic training, and to be, it wasn't sort of trying to, it was on a certain level it's natural, but it's also, you have to be very, very careful, cautious, and deal with it skillfully. Tiny questions?
It brings up for me that phrase, the Buddha's Dhamma body, like when he was speaking about previous Buddhas who didn't live that long, they didn't put forth the pattern yoga and such. But when the Buddha passes, he speaks about as long as the Dhamma is expounded in the world, the Buddha's Dhamma body still persists. And just an interesting reflection for me.
Uh-huh.
Was this after the Kosambi quarrel?
Pardon?
Was this incident after the argument?
This is after, it's like 2 years after? Yeah.
So at that time there wasn't the Vinaya, but there were offenses? Is that right?
There, the reality is there's mixed signals, of course, and obviously we got human beings together. You got to have some standards. And I think part of it is and there were groups of religious seekers and a basic kind of appreciation of a standard that, and so it's one way of looking at it would be that it wasn't quite as formalized. It's not that there weren't rules or there weren't protocols, but it wasn't as clearly formulated and explicated. That's one way of looking at it.
I was wondering if you could give your thoughts on how the Thai forest tradition is dealing with increasing renown and material support.
Well, it's declining. It's getting corrupted. It's just ordinary. I mean, it depends, and also Thai forest tradition is so broad that and diverse that it's not. You can't sort of. There is no definitive Thai forest tradition, so that different communities are dealing with it in different ways, and even within, say, Ajahn Chah's lineage, then it's being dealt with in different ways. I mean, there's some very exemplary standards that are being set that will get carried on, and then there's others who are yes, one hopes they go by the way of the dodo. So it's it's very human. So that and Wat Pah in particular, and it was mentioned yesterday how, I think is dealing with it quite skillfully, and there's things that are in place from Ajahn Chah and his example that have helped to preserve its integrity, and which doesn't mean everybody's going to pay attention or everybody's going to follow, but there is a general standard and procedures. There's the fact of these meetings and that everybody is accountable, and which sometimes means some monks don't show up to the meetings and then drift away after a while. So I mean that in itself is a helpful, and then they end up, but then or they go to the meeting and they get called out for say unskillful conduct or precedents that they're setting. So but it's always a struggle, and the Buddha recognized that, and it happened even in the Buddha's time, that there's a general drift that some were able to deal with skillfully and others weren't.